Welcome to yet another edition of ACFIM Talks, and a very good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are watching us from. My name is Felix Kafuma, and today in yet another edition, we are discussing captivity of state institutions in Uganda, and under spotlight is the case of Uganda Airlines. Before we start, today the 26th of August, allow me to first observe a moment of silence for a fallen General Eli Tumwine, who passed on yesterday, succumbed to lung cancer, and it's important that we observe a moment of silence to remember him. And may his soul rest in peace. Okay, I'm being joined by two gentlemen. So far, I already have Godbert Mushabe on call. I'll be introducing him in a short while. But as usual, as it is the case, this is where I welcome everybody to be part of this discussion. You can join us on our social media platforms. We are live on ACFIM Facebook page live, ACFIM Twitter at ACFIM UG, and also on our YouTube, ACFIM Uganda. You can be able to catch us and also be part of this interesting conversation as we take a detour on the captivity of state institutions in Uganda and looking at Uganda Airlines as a case study. This show is weekly. Every Friday at 11 up to midday, you catch us and you can be able to get the notifications and be part of this conversation. Like it is usually the case, allow me to make a bit of a preamble for anybody who's just joining us to appreciate where we are coming from and why should we be having this conversation. Like you all know that if you've been in Uganda or if you've been following Uganda, the way and the manner in which the management of public affairs is done, you'll appreciate that micromanagement has been a common denominator in President Museveni's style of leadership. And apologies for Museveni's style of management. I've always argued that by doing so, Museveni is responding to the trust that has been abused by those that he has entrusted with the levers of power, having been betrayed, and he has often come out to say that they have been self-centered and they ended up being corrupt and thus frustrating his vision. But critics that argue against Museveni's management style argue again that this style is responsible for the dysfunctionalization of state institutions, where systems have experienced systemic distortions that have resulted into captivity of state institutions. The coexistence of formal and informal decision-making systems in public institutions, where the latter is stronger, has led to collapse of once powerful organizations. And we can, in focus, talk about the Uganda Airlines of 1976 to 2001 as one of the classic cases to make this intro to be relevant. We shall also appreciate the fact that we have re-established Uganda Airlines just 2 years back, and now it's in the news for the wrong or right reasons as we debate and question whether Museveni's regime has learned anything or forgotten anything from the collapse of the airline in 2001. Currently, the young airline is being probed by the Parliamentary Committee on State Authorities and State Enterprises, COSASI, and the information coming through leaves a lot to be desired. The probe has raised red flags on the recruitment process of the current ED of the airline, Bamturaki Jennifer, who on the directive of President Museveni was appointed in that position. This directive, if you've been following, you remember that it short-circuited an ongoing recruitment process, which was left with only 2 days to close. And today on ACFIM Talks, I'm privileged to host two distinguished gentlemen. One is Godbert Mushabe, who is the Associate Director at the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, a think tank. He's also a lawyer and a development policy analyst and a social entrepreneur. Goodbye, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Felix. It's a great pleasure to be at ACFIM Talks. And good morning and good evening, everybody in the show.
Thank you so much. I got back to make it and be part of this conversation. I'll be joined by Captain Francis Babu, who said he's running late, but he'll be part of this conversation. And when he comes, I'll be able to introduce him and also help him settle in and we get the conversation started. As we wait for Captain Francis Babu, let me start with Godba. I'm sure Godba has been following the developments concerning the Kosase probe into Uganda Airlines. And you'll agree with me, maybe disagree, but probably I'll pick your thoughts on this one, because political interference in the governance and management of state institutions in Uganda seems to characterize Museveni's regime and has been blamed for the systematic distortions, which have resulted into what some of us call the captivity of state institutions. Uganda Airlines is one of the victims, as we see. What is your take on this argument?
Yeah, no, I actually don't substantially agree with you, but let me put it this way, that the question of Uganda Airlines is actually just a footnote in the whole discourse of capture of the state in the country. So in other words, Uganda Airlines is a very, very small footnote there in the story, because what we have in Uganda, and what we haven't really spent a lot of time to understand, is that the entire struggle by Museveni and his group to fight a war in 1980 was basically a struggle to capture state institutions, or to capture the state of Uganda. And of course, you can capture the state, and then if you are a disciplined leadership, you can then use those state institutions to liberate themselves and be the ones to run the country. That's what we call, when we talk of states and
I seem to be losing you, Godba, in terms of connection.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now that's better.
Yeah. No, so I was mentioning that the Museveni and his group, the NRA fought a war purposely to capture the state and therefore the state institutions. Now, when you have statesmen and women, it is those statesmen and women that then work to liberate the institutions of state, so that they are the ones which are running the country. Now, unfortunately, when you go into when you fully understand Museveni and the way he has run the country, is that actually they wanted to capture the state institutions and pursue an agenda that they had defined, and they are the ones who own the agenda. So you realize from the time they came to power in 1986, they have actually been focusing more on reconfiguring those institutions to be able to pursue their agenda, not to pursue the agenda of the state of Uganda, which would be a shared agenda. So what you have now is that you have captured the executive and personalized it in the form of the presidency. So you have an all-powerful president who basically looks at the country as his real estate company, and is able and thinks that he can be able to do everything, that he's not accountable to anybody. That is what you call the state capture. You see that he has been able to reconfigure the parliament, that the parliament, the legislature that we agreed on during the constitution making process has substantially changed right from 1996 to the present, that what you have now is the shadow of the legislature. You basically have men and women who run around the president, and the majority of them run around the president, and they're always thinking of what is the president thinking, what does he want to hear, and you no longer have an independent legislature that is supposed to play the oversight and accountability role and check the excesses of power of the legislature, of the executive. You have the judiciary. This is a captured institution that to the extent that you find the president can decide in his own right as an individual and say he's not going to appoint a chief justice, and the judiciary can spend more than 2 years without a head. Because under the concept of separation of powers, these institutions, these three arms of the state, the executive, the judiciary, the legislature, they are supposed to be equal, and they are supposed to be accountable to each other. So there should be no point, there should be no time when any of these institutions does not have a head. So that is really that's the bottom line. So the fact that the president can do things on his whims, and he's not accountable to Parliament, he's not accountable to the citizens, that's basically what you have as the state capture. Now you've seen that capture has extended now to the public service. So there is a lot of reconfiguration of the public service, where you are having the military take over most civilian institutions. You are having, the Uganda police, for example, that's an institution that has been taken over by the military. You go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The people who are supposed to be civilian leaders, the ministers, all of them are generals. The permanent secretary is a military general. The head of immigration is a military general. You can move to Minister of Agriculture. The permanent secretary is a military general. So you basically see that this is a deliberate effort to be able to capture the institutions of state and use them to further his personal agenda and mission the way he understands it. So that's why I'm saying that something like Uganda Airlines is really a footnote in the overall architecture of state institutions, and the extent to which Mr. Museveni and the people around him who know what actually the agenda is have been able to capture the institutions of state of Uganda.
Okay, but let's first pack it here, the issue of what we call a directive, because many have come out to say I was directed. It was a directive. Can a directive be challenged? When do we draw a line between a directive and an advisory? Because it looks like when the president directs, people don't question whether it's within the law, but go ahead and implement as directed. Even those we think that are well-read and can interpret the law and are good statesmen. When do we draw the line between a directive and beyond that? Can we have a situation whereby we have leaders with a backbone to say no to directives that are contravening or contradicting the rules of engagement, the laws, and for the good cause of Uganda?
No, unfortunately, when you have reached the point of state capture, those leaders, you won't find them. Because the process of capturing the state is a process of making sure that decision-making power is concentrated in the hands of those who want to control the state. So by the time we reach the kinds of state capture that we have now in Uganda, the people you are talking about are rarely available. You will not find them around. So General Katumba Wamala will get a directive from the president. First of all, he's a general. The person giving him a directive is the commander-in-chief. So he can just order for his arrest. if he does not follow the directive. If Katumba was arrested for disobeying the directives of the president, the likelihood is that he will be tried in the court martial, not even in the ordinary courts. But even the ordinary courts, they will not protect you, because even them, they have been captured. The legislature, the parliament, will not question your arrest because it has also been captured. The NRM MPs will be summoned to State House, and Museveni will explain why it is important to arrest Katumba Wamala for disobeying his directives, and he will tell them the directives are supposed to help NRM to keep power, and everybody, all these MPs want NRM to keep power because that is the patronage system in which they are participating. So, in other words, your question is actually not relevant, in the sense that at the time when these directives are being issued and nobody can challenge them, the state capture is literally complete. And that is what we are dealing with right now.
So, looking at the Uganda Airlines situation, because some have argued that probably, you remember when this kind of first came out about a year back, and some people are saying that probably this is the time. Some have argued that the president is definitely trying to protect the interest and the investment of Uganda Airlines, having been the biggest. He had a lot of interest in it when it was starting, and from your view, should we say that the involvement of Uganda Airlines do they presuppose captivity in its real sense, or protection of interests of Uganda Airlines on behalf of Ugandans?
I don't understand your question, Felix, because what are the interests of Ugandans?
The interests of Ugandans to have a functional national carrier, as it was 25 years back. I think that's the interest of every Ugandan.
The interest of, yes, the interest of Ugandans is to have a functional airline national carrier.
Yes. Yes.
And almost all of us know how successful enterprises or airlines are run. You can't pick some guy called Godberg, Felix, and say you go and run an airline. I don't think that is in the interest of Ugandans. The carrier is financed by Ugandan taxpayers.
True.
We have put in their money. We expect that whoever is responsible is able to follow specific procedures and guidelines and accountability rules to be able to employ staff and hold them accountable to certain levels of performance. So there is no way you can tell me that the desired situation that there is some grand ayatollah seated in the State House, and he's the only one who knows how an airline is run, and therefore he can go pick and choose, pick a Felix Kafuma and deploy you and say, I'm protecting the interests of Ugandans. So we need to be able to reflect on this approach. This whole thing that
but I think I lost you a bit on the network connection. Okay, that's good. But I think I've lost God. But can you hear me? I think I've lost you. Okay, I think I've lost God. But he was trying to make a case of whether the interests of Ugandans are being.
Hello, Felix.
Yes, you're back.
No, I realized I should have gone on the computer because these are incoming calls. Actually, they are the ones disrupting. My apologies.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, so yes. The point I was making is that the idea that you can have some grand ayatollah there in State House, and he's the only one who knows the vision of Ugandans, and he can't even trust the people that he appoints to run the airline or other agencies on our behalf, and every time he has to interfere with ordinary processes of doing things, because he's acting as a grand ayatollah, is exactly the clear manifestation of state capture. So that's what exactly you are dealing with.
All right. I'm hoping I can have Francis Babu join on set, because the couple of questions that I would want to ask Captain Francis Babu, concerning the technicalities of running an airline. But as I wait for Captain Francis Babu, I'll still run with Godba on this one. So, hypothetically speaking, and let's be honest with this conversation, what is the most likely outcome of the COSASE probe? Is it just yet another one of those?
It is Museveni who determines what the outcome would be, because the current evidence has shown that whenever he wants something, it's done the way he wants it. I think for me, the most stirring of all these parliamentary probes was the inquiry, the committee inquiry into the Kasese massacres, where the president met the Committee on Internal Affairs and said this has to stop, and they all went hiding. And there are a couple of other processes that that have gone on. So what happens, the end game of this inquiry is going to be more about what Museveni wants to be done. I know, for example, that he has also talked to some of the members on the committee, that I have it on full authority, that he has been talking to some of the members on the committee in the background. And you see, when you are an NRM MP and the president calls you and have a telephone conversation with you, even if he appears that he's consulting you, if you don't, most of these NRMPs, they don't really have the stamina. They will just collapse. They can no longer sustain the kind of inquiry that they are doing. So my reading is that given the various antecedents that we've had, this inquiry ends the way Museveni wants it. If it doesn't, then it means that you will see MPs that have decided to take their position as a legislature with equal power to the executive. But up until now, we haven't seen members of parliament appreciating that they have power vested in them by the constitution, and the people of Uganda who elect them, that they can choose to say, we have to put a stop to this kind of illegal actions by this guy.
Okay, but I understand that you're a businessman. So there's a question here which I want you to do justice to. Hypothetically speaking, and I think there have been a lot of conversation around the recruitment process during this probe, and let's look at the way the recruitment of the CEO was interfered with. And people are now arguing that what is the likelihood that the recruitment of more sensitive personnel such as pilots or engineers was also not interfered with? And if we are to borrow the precedent of interfering with the appointment of the executive director, what is the implication on the entire running of the airline if the entire process is politically interfered with?
First of all, maybe let me just do a clarification. I said maybe I'm not even a businessman. I just do business. I hope there's a difference. I try to do business, but when I do business, one of the things I've done, and by the way, it's extending the business to the NGO world where I have been running organizations. And I have this fundamental belief that the success of any business depends on the capacity of that business to compete for talent. And this is in terms of what is the job that you have, what is the best talent you can get on the market, and are you able to pay for it? So that is for me the bottom line. So even and now with more technical businesses like an airline, you really want to be at the top there competing. And I think that's why there is even the acceptance that maybe the state should be able to step in and subsidize these operations. So if Ugandan taxpayers are paying, we can hire the best people around the world to be able to run the airline and make it compete with other international airlines. Now, the problem is that the moment you get a process that is, first of all, that looks fraudulent, that lacks integrity, and it delivers people with questionable credentials, you are basically undermining the airline. I was very, very taken aback when I read a statement from General Katumba Wamala, basically saying that the COSASE probe and the discussions that are going on this probe are undermining this little child called Uganda Airlines. And I'm like, but how come a person of impeccable credentials like Katumba Wamala cannot understand that actually the biggest danger to this airline are responsible people who are vested with authority are taking the wrong decisions or acting in a fraudulent manner that lacks accountability. Having said that, the recruitment of staff, how they are recruited, will determine how accountable they are, how responsible they are. If you are recruited through the back door, you spend more time trying to appease your appointing authority, because it means that if you are appointed through the back door, it also means that you can actually be disappointed through the back door. So in other words, you spend more time trying to appease the appointing authority rather than doing your business and demanding that certain things be done the right way, because that's how the business will succeed.
Okay, we are still discussing the case of Uganda Airlines, but in the broader scheme of things, the captivity of state institutions in Uganda. And with me, I have Godbert Mushabe, who is the Associate Director at the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. I'm also expecting Captain Francis Babu to join us and offer more technical input on aspects to do with running the airline. But before we go for a break, I think I have time for one more question for Godbert before we take a break. That again, running with what General Katumba Wamala said, it seems like they're more concerned that the proceedings are projecting a certain image of how the airline is being managed, with the implication on that the publicity might not be good for the business. Given the fact that the airline is still young. Does this make sense from the business perspective? Because one can actually argue that, okay, fine, you are trying to do surgery on a problem, but the way you are handling it is that you are exposing the dirty linens that are making us look incompetent and less competitive, that might scare business away. What's your perspective on this one, God?
No, you see, that's the point that I'm trying to make, that the Ugandans who are discussing these questions of impropriety in the recruitment of the CEO and generally how the company is operating are not the problem. The problem are the people who are acting with impropriety. The problem is the president who sits there and basically interferes with the running of the airline because he thinks that he's the grand ayatollah and he can do anything. It's okay for you to say, I am the appointing authority, but you see, the framers of our constitution never envisaged that you'd have some guy seated somewhere in State House, and that guy could be Museveni, it can be a Kafuma, it can be a Godba. That you'd have some guy seated there, and that guy is the one appointing everybody, every other place the guy is appointing everybody. You appoint cabinet ministers, and they fail to do their work. You do the work for them. You interfere with their decisions, and man, that is how you kill an airline. The Ugandans who are discussing this impropriety and the fraud that we are seeing from COSASE probe are not the ones who are the problem. I think General Katumba Wamala, many of us have a lot of respect for him and his personality and his service to the nation, but he needs to take a step back and see where is the problem, because Ugandans are not the problem. The members of parliament who are inquiring into this airline within the COSASE committee are not the problem. The problem is President Museveni and General Katumba Wamala, who are failing to follow the rules on how to run an entity like Uganda Airlines.
Thank you so much. This is where we take a break, and then when we come back, we'll resume with the discussions on the Uganda Airlines as a case study and how captured are state institutions in Uganda.